Welcome to another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. That's Ryan McDowell. Over there is Matt Price, and I'm Dan Myler. Guys, week 3 is pretty much in the books. We had some good things that happened for sure, some awful things that happened, and then some certainly ugly things. It seemed to me, guys, like Sunday was a day of horrible clock management. Detroit gave away that game by making bad decisions late in the game and allowing Lamar Jackson to get the football back. It took a record-setting field goal, sure, and there's people on Twitter complaining about maybe a clock violation on the third down right before that. But really, Detroit did a horrible job running the ball, not going for that first down. And then the Chargers should have given away the game against the Chiefs. I really think Kansas City should have won that game. The other thing, from a fantasy perspective, guys, useless touchdowns. We had Lee Smith, Jody Fortson, Nick Westbrook, Ikeni, Devin Duvernay, and Kendrick Bourne, Olamide Zaccheaus, and the names go on and on. Tommy Tremble and Alec Ingold and Peyton Barber, Malcolm Brown, Tyler Conklin scored. Jerry McNichols got in the end zone. Useless fantasy points, Ryan. Even in leagues where you don't have to set a lineup in these best ball leagues, those you just shake your head at those awful touchdowns.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a frustrating day or week because of what you mentioned. We saw quite a few more injuries this week. That was a little bit of a repeat of last week. That's always something we hate to see, and so many turnovers in week 3. I don't think it was quite as bad as last week, but it was kind of a gross week again.
Man, it just feels like we're getting off to a rough start to the season fantasy-wise. We just can't get into a rhythm where we're seeing our studs score all these points. And now we're missing some of those studs, too, with guys like Dalvin Cook having to sit out this week.
Yeah, I mean, you guys didn't call the Nick Westbrook Ikeni leading the Titans in targets. I don't know why would you do that? Why wouldn't you? We saw lots of bad stuff this week. AJ Brown, after 2 disappointing games now, he's hurt. Targetless and catchless. So a lot of those studs we've been counting on letting us down the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been that way for sure. We, as we always do, we're going to react to everything that happened in week 3. And we always start on Thursday night. That saw the Panthers win 24-9, guys. And really the only news that anybody as dynasty managers thinks about here, Ryan, is Christian McCaffrey. Left with that hamstring injury, just 9 touches in the game for 40 yards. But the stats really don't matter. It's all about how long he's going to be out. And then also how useful Chuba Hubbard can be. He ends up going 11 for 52 on the ground, 3 for 27 through the air. Was useful, but just mixed in that backfield. It feels to me, guys, like maybe Chuba Hubbard can do what Mike Davis did last year. He could be that kind of player, and if he catches 5 or 6 balls a game, he's going to be very useful for us as fantasy managers, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, the offense is basically the same as it was last year. So I do think we can expect Hubbard to produce. We saw Royce Freeman in that game as well. He did not look great. I didn't think so. I would think Hubbard would continue to get the first shot. It's just a question of how long. As you said, are we missing CMC? We still don't know. I thought we might have more of an official word, but I guess with this injury, it's more of a wait and see. So I'm assuming at least 3 weeks at this point. If you've got McCaffrey, you're always a contender. So it's big news and it's frustrating news.
Yeah, frustrating for sure. The other stat lines from this game, Sam Darnold, once again, a fringe quarterback 1, goes over 300 yards and rushes for 2 touchdowns. And then, Matt, DJ Moore, once again, putting up big numbers, 8 catches, 126 yards, didn't find pay dirt, but 12 targets in the game, looked awfully good.
Yeah, I mean, he's a dynasty wide receiver 1. If he wasn't for you before, he's currently the wide receiver 13 in September ADP. In consensus ranks, he's the wide receiver 14. He's my wide receiver 9 right now, but consensus, we have him behind players like Godwin, T. Higgins, DeAndre Hopkins, Terry McLaurin, who he's actually 2 years younger than, Stephon Diggs, who he's 3 years younger than. So I think there is a case to be made to put him ahead of those guys. He currently has a 30% target share in the offense through the first 3 games. He has 31 total targets to Terrace Marshall's 14, and Robbie Anderson, it's a guy like we were talking about as, if you don't want to spend up for DJ Moore, don't worry about it. Just get Robbie Anderson. He's only got 11 targets and doesn't seem nearly as involved in the offense. As far as like trade value, just 4 days ago, we have Callaway, Pittman, and a first for DJ Moore. I think I want DJ Moore pretty easily on that. About a week ago, we have Amari Cooper for DJ Moore and a second. I think I would probably just take DJ Moore. I don't even need the second. You can keep it. And then about 2 weeks ago, Cam Akers, McCole Hardman, and a second for DJ Moore. So he's gettable. I think he's easily worth 2 firsts currently right now. And if you can go get him for that, I don't see why you wouldn't.
Another receiver that put up nice numbers in this game, Ryan, was Brandon Cooks, 9 catches, 112 yards. Another guy that didn't find the end zone, but the 11 targets, encouraging. Once again, he's the only show in town down there in Houston. And if I'm an NFL general manager that needs a wide receiver, I'm calling about Brandon Cooks. If I'm a Dynasty general manager as well, I'm calling about Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, he's the only player on that team really I want any part of in my weekly lineups. He's continuing to produce. We saw the quarterback switch due to the injury to Tyrod Taylor with Davis Mills in, and he was far from impressive, but it didn't matter when it comes to Cooks. He put up big numbers again. As you said, we've got a couple games left, so things could change. But as of right now, he's a top 12 wide receiver on the week. So that would be his second wide receiver 1 game already through 3 weeks, a wide receiver 2 in the other game. He's quarterback proof. I know I've been guilty of this. I just keep associating him with his concussion history and thinking he's one injury away. You hate to think that about a player. But that has really brought his value down quite a bit. And we're still kind of holding that against him.
Yeah, and maybe for good reason, because that does linger in all our heads. He's 1 hit away from missing significant time and potentially even career-threatening type injuries when it comes to these head injuries. But it's hard to ignore the production, Ryan. He's been so good, and now, like you said, he is quarterback proof. We don't have to look at, well, he doesn't have a real quarterback throwing him the football. That's really not the case, because Davis Mills, although he looked better than I expected, to be honest with you guys, he's certainly not a top 32 quarterback, let alone a top 16 in the NFL. And he was able to get Cooks the football. Let's move on to the Sunday games, guys, and start in Buffalo, where the Bills throttled the football team 43-21. Hey, Matt, last week we were talking about Josh Allen regression. Come on now, bud. You got to give him a little credit here. 358, 4 touchdowns, added a rushing touchdown. Probably the highest scoring player in your league this week. Josh Allen was magnificent on Sunday.
Yeah, he was. These are the games that Josh Allen can bring you, and he didn't even have a great game on the ground, so he still has that upside that's untapped. Washington, obviously, not as good as we thought of a defense is going to be. Somehow not really getting any pressure on the quarterback, and that's been, something that has caused Josh Allen's inconsistencies in the past. So when he's got that clean pocket, he's a great quarterback, Dan.
He certainly is. The one negative maybe is another one of these teams. It was the tight end Knox, the running back Zach Moss that caught a touchdown. Emmanuel Sanders caught a couple. I know that helped a few dynasty owners out there. But like Stephon Diggs, 6 for 62. You expect a bigger stat line when he throws for 358. The other 2 receivers, though, I mentioned Sanders, the 2 touchdowns, Matt. 5 catches for 94 yards and the 2 scores for Sanders. Cole Beasley went 11 for 98 on 13 targets. These guys are putting up numbers.
Yeah, we talked about Beasley in week 1 as kind of like a cheap way to get access to this offense and a cheap way to get targets. He now has 13 targets in 2 out of 3 games. So, you're never probably going to get those huge touchdown weeks, those league winning kind of weeks, but I don't mind 11 for 98, 20 points in my lineup from a guy that I, paid a 3rd round pick for. Can you get him for a 3rd at this point? So yeah, those are some cheap targets to get access to this offense.
From a Washington football team perspective, Ryan, there's not a lot to really hang our hat on. Taylor Heineke went for 212, a couple of touchdowns, but threw 2 picks. Terry McLaurin coming off that big game last week, just 4 for 62. Logan Thomas found the end zone late, so at least that made his day sufferable. What about Antonio Gibson? Because if it's not for that one screen pass that goes for 73 and a score, we're looking at a stat line of 12 carries for 31 yards and just a couple of targets. The screen pass for the score really saved the day.
It really did, and that was certainly a great play. Glad to see him get continue to be a little more involved in the passing game. But like you said, outside of that one play, it was frustrating. You look at the past 2 weeks; he's RB25, RB31, currently sitting as the RB14. Even with that long touchdown play, you would like to see it rank even higher than that. I think a lot of it is the defense just not quite being as good as we mentioned. Matt hit on that as well, and that I think that's impacting I think that's impacting Gibson just from the standpoint that they're behind in games, not able to control the clock, maybe like we thought they would be. I love Gibson. I mean, I think in our projection show a few weeks ago, I called him the 101 in Dynasty next year, and that's certainly not looking like it's going to happen.
No, it's not. But, that one play does show that upside and really makes Dynasty managers shake their head as to why they're not trying to get Gibson the ball in space more, because he can do those types of things. He should have gone down multiple times, especially at about inside the 10. There was no way he was going to score, and somehow he finds the pylon to get into the end zone. So Gibson's a great player, but really underutilized. Reminds me a little bit of Aaron Jones in Green Bay a couple of years ago when Mike McCarthy just would not allow him to get the ball the 16 to 24 times he needs to get it every single game. Let's jump over to the Bears and the Browns. Chicago falls 26-6. In this game, I think most Dynasty managers were watching this one for Justin Fields. Even though the Browns came out on the top, there was nothing great really in Cleveland. Mayfield 246 and a score. Chubb ran for 84, but didn't even get a target in the passing game. Kareem Hunt went 10 for 81 and found pay dirt. Also caught 6 for 74. So if you were forced to play him, you feel good about that. Really not a whole lot to talk about outside of Odell Beckham Jr., Matt. Ryan. He comes back and posts 5 catches for 77 yards on 9 targets.
Yeah, it was good to see OBJ back in the lineup. The Browns certainly needed him with Landry suffering that knee injury last week. And I think we had talked about the reliance of that Browns offense on the tight ends when it comes to the passing game. So they needed OBJ back on the field, and I thought he played really well. Led the team in targets with 9 and went 5 for 77. So it looks like he's right back in that wide receiver 2 range. Stick him in your lineups every week.
Yeah, as long as he's healthy, he looks like a guy we can count on. Justin Fields, Matt, maybe not so much. I saw a lot of talk on Twitter Sunday morning talking about how if you have Fields on your team in a super flex league, plug him in there. He's a QB2. Why'd you draft him? I saw a couple times. If you weren't going to play him right out of the chute, he ends up 6 for 20 passing, just 68 yards, sacked 9 times, held onto the ball way too much. And Matt, just 3 carries for 12 yards.
Yeah, that's why you thought you could plug him in, was that rushing floor, right? Like that's why we drafted, one of the reasons why we drafted Field. He has a nice deep ball and all that, but really for fantasy, we want those rushing yards. And last week, coming in relief of Andy Dalton, 10 rushing attempts in just 2.5 quarters. This week, 3 in a full game. I saw a tweet from Troy King at TK Mode on Twitter. Field says fewer rushing yards in week 3 than Dalton had in weeks 1 and 2. So that is definitely not what we signed up for with Justin Fields. And watching the offense, it honestly kind of just felt like Nagy is trying to force him into the same offense as Andy Dalton. He's not playing to the strengths that Fields offers, as his strengths of the runner, obviously, in this game, and his ability to play outside of structure. So it feels like they need to tune this offense around Fields if he's going to remain the starter. And if they're going to force him into this Andy Dalton offense, it doesn't seem like it's going to work. That said, next week, I think they get Detroit. So a little bit easier of a matchup. Cleveland obviously is a very good defense. So hopefully we'll see more next week.
Yeah, hopefully we do. I was I was very disappointed in how Fields played. He looked like he was taking way too long to start his progressions in the pocket. He didn't have that much time, but even when they did have those quick outlet and hot routes, he wasn't getting the ball out to those. He looked lost, looking down at the rush at times. And, honestly, with that offensive line, which ranks as one of the worst in the NFL, it's not that much of a surprise, but it certainly is frustrating because we all see Fields' upside and really his potential to be not only dynamic as a runner, but also as a passer. And we didn't see any of that with only 68 passing yards on Sunday. Let's jump over to Baltimore and Detroit. This was a competitive ball game. As I said in the opening, the Lions should have won it, but lost in the last second. Record-setting kick. That was pretty exciting. Off the crossbar and in. Ravens win 19-17 behind Lamar Jackson. 287 and a touchdown. Should have been more, though, because Hollywood Brown couldn't haul in anything, it felt like. At least 3 drops that I saw, guys. At least 2 of those go for long touchdowns. So Lamar Jackson's line looks way better. Hollywood Brown's obviously looks way better if he can haul in a couple of those. One of them in the back of the end zone with nobody around him. One of them when he got behind the defense running downfield, nobody behind him. Both of those are big, big plays that really we need as Lamar Jackson managers. And because that didn't happen, his numbers look a little slighted. Now, Mark Andrews, he had a decent game, 5 for 109. That's acceptable. The running game, however, Ryan, we're used to Baltimore putting up big numbers in the running game. And on Sunday, Latavius Murray, 7 for 28 yards, no targets. Tyson Williams, 5 for 22 on the ground, no catches on 1 target. So these running backs aren't foolproof. This seemed like a decent matchup against Detroit, but they come up with under 3 points each in PPR leagues.
Yeah, I came away from last week's game against Kansas City a little hopeful when it comes to Tyson Williams. I was pretty impressed with him. And then in this game, even when Baltimore's basically leading almost the entire game, he only gets the 5 carries. And it was Murray who looked like the lead back, although not by much, not much of a difference. And like you said, we really don't want to use either of those guys. I think it's just becoming a Buffalo Bills situation. I can't remember if I mentioned that on the show last week or maybe in an article, but Josh Allen runs so much. We're seeing, of course, Lamar Jackson run so much that the running backs just basically become useless.
Yeah, and that's what happened here for Baltimore. In Detroit, however, not quite useless. DeAndre Swift, 14 for 47 and a score, also caught 7 passes for 60 yards. He's going to be an RB1 on the week. And Jamal Williams, he got into the end zone, 12 for 42 on the ground, and the rushing touchdown, also caught 2 for 25. One last thing on the Lions, Khalif Raymond, 6 catches, 68 yards on 10 targets. He's probably on the waiver wire in most leagues, unless you're in a real deep one. Guy to monitor for sure is some of the other names like Quintez Cephas, who is just 1 for 8. Amon-Ra St. Brown, just 1 for 2 yards. Those guys didn't come through, but Khalif Raymond was open in the middle of the field. I mentioned Marquise Brown's stats, Matt. What do you think of that? He drops the passes. I'm sure everybody saw it. Does this create any kind of window to go get Hollywood Brown on your roster?
I don't know if it's creating a window. I mean, a little bit, because if he have the 2 touchdown game, then that window is probably shut. But he's been very productive, I think, this season. At least exceeded my expectations. So I would like to go try to buy him for maybe like a second or third, or maybe even 2 seconds, if the price gets that high. And the trade finder, not a lot of stuff going on there, but Logan Thomas straight up. So if you're in a tight end league, that's not a tight end premium league, and but really, Thomas might be your starter, but I feel like I might want to get Brown in that situation, depending on the makeup of my team. This is a weird one too. Naheem Hines, Zach Moss, KJ Hamler, and Sammy Watkins for Marquise Brown. I think I kind of want Brown over all of those guys. So I think there is a chance to go get him this week, and I'm going to be trying to do that.
Yeah, I'd be trying if I didn't have him in all my leagues already, but Hollywood Brown is on my roster and in my starting lineup in every league already, which isn't a bad thing. How about the Cardinals and the Jaguars? Jags led 19-10 into the third and late into the third quarter, and then Arizona just scores 21 straight and beats the Jags down 31-19. Kyler Murray didn't throw a touchdown but ran for one, so I guess that saves his day a little bit. Story here, probably James Conner, maybe he scores twice, but just 11 for 43. AJ Green had a nice game, 5 for 112 through the air on 6 targets. I just don't know how to read this Cardinals offense. If it's not Kyler Murray and it's not DeAndre Hopkins, there's just not a lot to get excited about, really, because Edmonds and Connor, they're sharing. Kirk is going to have his big games, and he went 7 for 104 in this game as well. Green, I guess, fills in because Hopkins was banged up and had a disappointing game. There's just not a lot outside of your big names. In Jacksonville, however, Trevor Lawrence, we probably can't even rely on him as a QB2, guys. He's throwing too many interceptions, making bad decisions. 219 a score and 2 interceptions in this game. And then James Robinson, maybe the only silver lining for the Jaguars, Ryan, at least for fantasy, 15 carries, 88 yards and a touchdown, also caught 6 balls for 46.
Yeah, there was obviously panic after week 1 with James Robinson's usage and being outproduced by Carlos Hyde. And we saw that shift last week, although not necessarily by a great amount. And then it's totally kind of back to normal or back to expectation here in week 3. Like you said, Jacksonville was in the lead, or at least in a close game through most of that. So that helps Robinson when it comes to his opportunity on the ground. But I think the real bright spot for dynasty managers, for fantasy players in general, is Robinson's usage in the passing game. 6 targets, caught all 6 for 46 yards. So he's trending up. I don't think the value is going to bounce back a ton yet after that week 1 panic. If it did, I would suggest a chance to sell him. I just don't think that opportunity's there yet.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it just yet. I will say that Carlos Hyde got a couple shots inside the 5-yard line. That's a little bit frustrating. So while the numbers look good, Hyde did get those opportunities around the goal line. Not exactly what we want to see, because very rarely is anybody playing Carlos Hyde in their lineups. And most of us are trying to get a little bit of usage out of Robinson out of that backfield. How about the Chargers? They upset the Chiefs 30-24 in the ball game in Kansas City. Justin Herbert was great, 281-4. So that's the game we've been waiting for from him. First time having that monster game carrying dynasty managers to wins. He hit Mike Williams early and often, 7 for 122 and 2 scores, gets that late touchdown. Kind of is gravy for dynasty managers. We all expected him to run out the clock, kick the field goal, win the game. Williams catches the touchdown, and that turns him from a good wide receiver 1 into a high-end wide receiver 1. I'm wondering, Ryan, we mentioned the term wide receiver 1 and Mike Williams, and people get a little bit shaky. Well, he did it this week. He's done it in the past. Do we have to start thinking about Mike Williams as a fringe wide receiver 1 for our fantasy rosters?
From a fantasy standpoint, we have to. In his career, he scored more than 23 fantasy points 6 times in a game. In a game 6 times, I should say. And 3 of those are this year. So 3 of the 6 23-point fantasy games have come in the past 3 weeks. So, after week 1, we were hopeful. After week 2, we said, lock him in your lineup. And now after week 3, I think our expectations can change. Now, the dynasty value is a different category, because we have seen multiple years of injuries, multiple years of up and down production. He's a free agent at the end of the season. So there's of course so much that goes into his long-term value. But if you're talking just this short term, the rest of this season, yeah, I think he's a wide receiver 1. He's getting treated that way by his team. He's got one of the best quarterbacks in the league. If
you're a contender, Ryan, are you willing to give up a late first for Mike Williams?
Absolutely.
Easily.
Me too. Easily.
Yep. Yeah, he's right up there with Keenan Allen now, who had another game, 8 for 50 in a score on 12 targets. Herbert's spreading the ball around. Eckler got his 11 for 55 on the ground, 6 for 52 and a score through the air as well. From the Chiefs' point of view, Kelsey was great, 7 for 104. Tyreek did enough, I guess, 5 for 56, but fumbled. Also had a 10-yard run. And then Mahomes, 260, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks, 45 rushing yards. His stat line was just fine, guys. He's bailing out of the pocket a little bit early. He's looking for the big play all the time. The ball's not coming out as quickly as it has maybe in the past. And some of that has to do with the offensive line, and he's taken some big hits. But he doesn't exactly look like that MVP Patrick Mahomes that we've seen over the last couple of years. Speaking of which, guys that aren't exactly what we were hoping they'd be, Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a nice game, Matt. He went over 100 yards, 17 carries, 2 catches for 9, and got in the end zone. What do you think of Clyde?
I'm very impressed with this game. It's nice to see that usage. We still have some issues in the passing game. Only 5 targets now total in 3 games, I believe. So that's not great. You know, you draft CEH high in your rookie draft, maybe the 101 overall last year. You know, top first round pick in a lot of startup leagues, and he's kind of largely disappointed. In 16 career games, he scored below 10 fantasy points 7 times. And above 15 points only 4 times. In 2020, he had the 16th most touches in the NFL and only had 5 touchdowns. Now he has 6 total in 16 games. Coming into this week, so this is pre-week 3 stats, but coming into week 3, there were 51 running backs with 10 or more carries, and PFF graded him 51 out of 51. Not great. 50th out of 51 in yards after contact. Also not great. 49th out of 51 in their elusive rating. So I think you might be able to say that some of this, at least for this season, is due to that high ankle sprain he suffered back in the second preseason game in August. But this is the first week he's been really, and maybe this is the first week he's been really healthy. But the passing game usage, like I said, 5 targets in 3 games. That's not what we thought we were getting when we drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So you have to think that comes up a little bit, but it just doesn't seem like this offense wants to throw the ball to the running back. So I'm happy to get out now if I can. I don't know. Maybe you can get a first and a second for him. That feels like a little bit of a stretch, maybe off of this big game. He has been moved a ton in the last 4 days. He's been involved in 26 trades in just the last 4 days on the trade finder. And there's too many to bring up, but I did want to pose this one to you guys because I thought it was interesting. Saquon Barkley and a second, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire and a first.
Yeah, that one, that sounds like a lot of fun. We're kind of just shuffling guys that we need to play better than what they have to this point, and, you know, paying a little bit more for the guy who's done it in the past. I don't think I'm doing the Clyde side of that trade.
Yeah, I think I'm keeping Barkley.
I'm keeping the Barkley side of the trade, most likely. Let's jump into the Saints and the Patriots, guys. The Saints win this one 28-13. Alvin Kamara really stole the show, 24 for 89. Also caught 3 for 29 and a score. That's good enough for us as Alvin Kamara managers. Jameis Winston, on the other hand, 128 and 2 touchdowns, didn't turn the ball over. That was just fine. Taysom Hill came in and snaked a rushing touchdown down inside the 5-yard line. And you know, really, it's same old, right? When it comes to the Saints, Ryan, they're outside of Kamara. We're not going to use many of these guys unless we're really in a pinch. And if we are in a pinch and are forced to, we're going to squint the whole game because it's not going to feel good.
No, and it's crazy to think this about this team because for so long, and I'm talking about 10 to 15 years, it feels like this has been one of the teams we could rely on to put up big fantasy points for us. And that's just not what this team is anymore. So hopefully you've already adjusted to that. It's Alvin Kamara and really nothing else. You know, we thought maybe Troutman or Juwan Johnson or Marquez Callaway. Callaway did catch a touchdown in this game, but just not enough. We're not seeing enough usage in the passing game overall, or enough volume, I should say. Kamara did have 24 carries. That's a new career high for him. We would like to see, I guess, more work in the passing game for him and maybe fewer carries, but still a good sign that they're leaning on him.
Yeah, they were leaning on him. Tony Hill, 6 carries for 32, also found the end zone in the running game. Wish that could have gone to Kamara. From a New England perspective, Mac Jones threw his first pick of the season, or of his career, I guess. In fact, he threw 3 of them and really didn't look all that good. Threw for 270 and the 1 touchdown, but really didn't look nearly as good as he did throughout the preseason and throughout the first couple weeks. And then Damian Harris could not get it going on the ground. 6 carries, 14 yards. We had an injury to James White. It just never came together really for the Patriots. Jacoby Myers went 9 for 94 on 14 targets. I guess that's the lone bright spot for fantasy managers when it comes to the Patriots.
Yeah, the Patriots are at this point really just one of those teams. They don't have any plug and play guys on their roster. We've already said that about a couple of teams, and we could say it about more. There's no player on the Patriots roster that I know every week I want them in my fantasy lineup.
They certainly don't. I thought maybe Damian Harris was inching towards that after the first couple of weeks. That usage and the inability really to get anything going on the ground in New England certainly put that to a halt. And considering he's not a big part of the passing offense ever, that just limits his upside anyway. Let's talk about the Falcons, who squeaked by the Giants 17-14. Matt Ryan, 243 and 2 touchdowns. I guess that's fine. He's really struggling. He's not getting the ball out on a time. It feels like he's a step slower than maybe he was a year ago. Reminds me a little bit, Ryan, of Ben Roethlisberger over the last couple of years, that he's down that same path where, yes, he still has it. He can still see what's going on in front of him, make the right read, but the ball's not out quite as fast, and it doesn't have the same kind of zip and the same kind of velocity when it comes to getting it to the receiver and giving him enough room to make something happen with his legs.
Yeah, he's definitely on that Ben Roethlisberger pathway, and maybe he's a year behind what we're seeing from Ben right now, but regardless, it's not good. And the really bad thing for both of those teams is they have no plan. They have nobody behind those two veterans that they can really realistically give a shot to and expect any better production. So it really stinks, because we're talking about 6 players between those two teams that could be fantasy, not just stars, but difference makers. The receivers in Pittsburgh, and we'll get to them more in a moment, I know. But of course, Pitts and Ridley. Ridley had a fine game. Pitts didn't even see a target until I think the middle of the second half. I don't know. I don't know what's happening there. It's frustrating.
It's very frustrating. The offensive line is not great. They don't have a real running back, so they can't establish that part of the game, which then can't create that play action passing that we expected with this offense that came over from Tennessee and did it so well. So they're just missing the pieces, and it starts with Matt Ryan. Kelvin Ridley, you mentioned, fine, 8 for 61, got a red zone look, 11 targets, but we're not winning leagues. There were a lot of us out there thinking maybe Kelvin Ridley could be the overall wide receiver 1 this year. And that seems far, far away right now, because just to get him the football, they have to run bubble screens and little like things that you do for some of these small slot receivers that, really Kelvin Ridley should be able to get downfield and get open. And he is. It's just that I'm not convinced Matt Ryan can get him the football. You also mentioned Pitts, 2 for 35 on 3 targets. Yuck. That is just gross. The Giants had a chance to win this game, probably should have won the game. Daniel Jones, 266, didn't throw an interception, also didn't throw a touchdown. Saquon Barkley did find the end zone, though, Matt.
Yeah, and I mean, he looked good out there. I thought he did pull himself out in the first half, kind of limped off the field, but came back in the second half. So we'll have to watch that and see if that injury kind of flared up, the little ankle or whatever it was. But the most encouraging thing for me was his usage in the passing game is back, 7 targets, actually tied for the team lead with Colin Johnson. Remember Colin Johnson from Jacksonville? He's on the Giants now, but no, Saquon tied for the team lead there. That touchdown was really nice. He kind of flew 4 yards in the air over that offensive line. So I'm encouraged with what we've seen from him, and with Daniel Jones playing better than I think really anyone thought. Then maybe there's something here for Saquon still, and he might be able to get that first round draft capital back, I think.
This is a messy situation in New York. Galladay came in questionable, got on the field and caught 4 for 64, but they lost Darius Slayton in the game. Sterling Shepard went down and didn't finish the game as well. They were relying on guys like CJ Board and you mentioned Johnson. Evan Ingram came back, but he doesn't look like he's really ready for prime time just yet. And then Kadarius Toney can hardly get on the field, and they all talked about him as this big weapon when he finally got healthy in training camp. So it's a messy situation in New York. I don't think they have it figured out just yet either. Hopefully they do by the end of the season, because really with all those names, fellas, it lines up for an offense full of weapons, and they should be able to do way more than what they did against a very poor Falcons defense on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think that's part of. I think the injuries are part of what helped Barkley see some increased passing game usage. So hopefully that continues since he actually produced in that way. So regardless of the injuries, maybe he gets more involved. I don't know. Back to the Falcons, thinking dynasty and thinking long term. Even though he's off to a very disappointing start, this entire team is. I don't think we can call Pitts a buy low. His value is, maybe has dropped a little bit, but he's still kind of the the favorite child of dynasty managers. He's not going for below market anywhere. Ridley, I think, is more interesting if you want to target him in dynasty trades. You just have to have a more long-term view with him.
And I think with Pitts, today was obviously disappointing. He hasn't had that blow up game yet, but I do think it does just feel like it's coming to me. Maybe that's just my flag planting. I don't know, but I did see some encouraging numbers for the offense in general coming into week 3 from this article I read on The Athletic. The Falcons have averaged 5.3 points plays, 5.3 yards per play with Pitts on the field, and only 2.6 when he's not on the field. And 9 pass plays over 9 yards with Pitts on the field, and 0 without. So I do think the offense has been better with him on there. It just hasn't really shifted his direction yet. And like you guys said, Matt Ryan is maybe the thing that's wrong with this offense. But I don't think it's necessarily anything that Pitts has done wrong at this point. So there's no reason to discount him right now.
Yeah, he's not going to go for any kind of discount anywhere. He's not even. A lot of times, the three of us talk about maybe you don't get a discount, but he's more available today than he was yesterday. Yep. I don't even think we're to that range just yet. We talk always about how these rookies don't lose value in their rookie season, and he is not going to lose a lick of it throughout his. The Bengals really hammered the Steelers 24-10. This wasn't much of a game, even though it was a 2-touchdown game on the scoreboard. The Bengals really dominated it from start to finish. Joe Burrow threw 3 touchdowns. But the story in this game is all about the rookies, fellas. Najee Harris, he had a huge game. Jamar Chase had his first 2-touchdown game of his career, has 4 in 3 games already. And guys, I mentioned Harris. If I had come to you and said, hey, somebody from this Bengals Steelers game is going to catch 14 balls, you'd be going through names like Chase and Tyler Boyd and Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster. And it was Najee Harris, 14 catches for 102 yards, just dump off central. Also had 14 carries, so 28 total touches, 40 yards on the ground. Harris was really, really good. He did a lot for fantasy. Jamar Chase did more and looked even better. 4 catches, 65 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and looked like he could have caught 10 or 12, or he could have been the one that caught the 14 balls. He was open all the time, and if it weren't for the little bit of pressure the Steelers were getting on Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase would have had a blow-up game. The 2 touchdowns are great, but the sky is the limit for this guy. These rookies looked incredible.
Yeah, and those are the 2 players we were debating as the 101. Most of them, or they both went in the top 2 in most single quarterback rookie drafts, and we're seeing why. That's Harris and Chase, of course. Both of them produced, as you said. I mean, Najee Harris, 14 catches and 19 targets. Both of those are records for a rookie running back by far, not even close. So a huge game. You have to expect that type of usage to continue because Deontay Johnson's already hurt. Juju Smith-Schuster left this game with an injury. Chase Claypool left the game twice with an injury, came back both times. So we'll see what happens with Claypool. But regardless, they're thin at the wide receiver depth chart. And even if they weren't, Big Ben can't get them the ball. So that's where all the dump offs come. They even dumped it off on 4th and 10, one of the dumbest play calls we've seen in quite a while. Obviously, that didn't work. As great as Harris was, he got swallowed up pretty quickly on that one.
Yeah, that was – I'm going to give credit to Cincinnati on that. They brought everybody up. It looked like they were going to blitz the whole group, and they all took a step forward. Ben started dumping it off, and they all dropped out. And, they really suckered him into throwing that check down which isn't that difficult to do to Ben Roethlisberger at this point. He wants to throw the short one. He's not getting the ball down the field at all. Chase Claypool did look pretty good, though, 9 for 96. He was hobbled, as you mentioned, 15 targets. He was really the only show left in town. Man, that Steelers team looks like a shell of itself. The one that we saw early last year and in 2019 just doesn't exist anymore. The Steelers, they look rough. Ryan, you mentioned on the show notes that the question, when does Ben get benched? If they had anybody behind him, it might have already happened.
Yeah, I mean, Mason Rudolph's still there. Some of the same names that we've heard. I think Josh Dobbs, I believe he's still there. I think he's on IR right now. Not even sure what that injury is, honestly. But there's no real options. There's definitely no long-term options. But I mean, if they keep losing, at some point they've got to just pull the plug here. And maybe there's a 5% chance that Rudolph is the 2022 starter. I don't think that's realistic. I would be in Dynasty, though. I would be buying all three of those wide receivers. Harris, again, he's producing now, and I don't think there's any type of discount on him. But after the week 2 game in one Dynasty league, I was offered I was offered Chase Claypool for Henry Ruggs even up. And I scooped that up and took Claypool, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to start him very much this year, but I'm glad to have him long term.
Yeah, long term, he looks like a wide receiver 1 in the future.
Don't you think, like, once they get, I mean, I guess they're probably not going to give up until it's clear they're out of playoff contention, but it feels like they should see what they have with Haskins at some point, from a former first round pick. Not that we think that there's necessarily anything there, but they did sign him, so maybe they can reclaim him. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe there's something there. We all doubt it, right?
Something, at least a more live arm than Ben has right now. Somebody who can throw the ball deep too.
Yeah, but just another statue in the pocket that doesn't process information fast enough and get the ball out. Those are the things that were his downfall with Washington. Nothing we saw in the preseason shows he's ready to move past that, at least from what I saw. The Titans, they won 25-16, beat the Colts on Sunday. Ryan Tannehill had his best game of the year, 197 and 3 touchdowns, 56 rushing yards, put a cherry on top for his dynasty managers, but did throw the 2 picks. Derrick Henry, oh my gosh, he's already carried the ball 80 times this year, guys. 80 times in 3 games. He goes 28 for 113, didn't find the end zone, but caught 3 passes for 31. That looks just fine. It was the receivers, though, for Tennessee, Ryan, because these kind of no names, guys that we didn't expect to contribute this season, let alone this early in the season, were forced to because A.J. Brown wasn't on the field. Julio Jones wasn't on the field at times. A.J. Brown, no catches. Julio, 3 for 47. So what's the deal?
Well, the deal with Brown is we've already seen 2 frustrating games, and now he's hurt. And he was ruled out. He was not ruled out quickly, but obviously never even attempted to get back on the field. Wasn't really getting any kind of treatment. Didn't go to the locker room. Just never came back. So that was an odd situation. You would think after he went out that Julio Jones would get peppered with targets. That didn't happen either. 4 total targets in the game. And then late in the game when they were trying to sew it up, he wasn't even on the field. That coaching staff, Mike Vrabel basically called that a management situation. I don't know what that means. When it's late in the game, you want your best players out there. I have no idea what's going on. They're lucky to get a win here, in my opinion.
Yeah, they a late play to seal the game. They had guys like Chester Rogers, Michael Pruitt, Cameron Batson, and Jeff Swaim on the field and on a passing down, and really are fortunate to come out of that game with a win against the banged up Colts, who got more banged up, really. Quentin Nelson, he gets hurt. That affects the running game. That affected Carson Wentz, who came in, busted up already, and really didn't look all that good. 194, didn't turn the ball over, but had no mobility in the pocket. Jonathan Taylor, just 10 carries for 64 yards and 1 catch for 8. I guess if there's something to talk about here, it's that Nyheim Hines, Matt, was involved once again, both as a runner a little bit. He got in the end zone on the ground, and then as a pass catcher, 5 for 54 on 6 targets.
Yeah, and it's going to be like this with Hines. I think last week he disappointed, only like one carry and 2 targets, something like that. Week 1 he played well for us on fantasy teams, and it seems like he's fine for a flex play, maybe a running back too, if you're really in hurting, if you've lost CMC, if you've lost Dalvin Cook, somebody that can fill in there. And this week looked pretty good. Scored the touchdown on the receiving, 5 out of 6, caught 5 out of 6 targets, 6 carries to Jonathan Taylor's 10. So he looks good to me. If you want to go get him, I think you can probably get him for a late second if you had to pay that much, maybe even an early third. Someone might be looking to get out there in the trade finder. Mostly throw in most of the deals he's involved in. One I saw that I did like was sending Lillard Fournette for Naheem Hines and KJ Osborne. So something like that, I think, is a possibility. And the nice thing about Hines is I don't think he's just this 1 year play. He's going to be a thorn in Jonathan Taylor's side for the foreseeable future. He just signed that big contract, 3 years for $18.6 million, with 12 of that guaranteed. And there's really no outs in that contract until after 2022. So if you are able to go acquire him, he's a multi-year asset, I think, in our PPR leagues.
I can't believe I just heard that. It's good that Naheem Hines is a thorn in Jonathan Taylor's side, Matt.
Good for us that didn't pay up for Taylor and are slumming it with Naheem Hines of the world in our running back slots.
Yeah, the zero RB theory fellas that are out there. Guys, we're sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight, the fastest growing daily fantasy site in the world. Instead of spending your time building elaborate salary cap rosters or competing against professional players, you can explore unique, fun, easy-to-play games like More or Less, Knockout Kings, Eagle Eye, Goal Rush, or Touchdown Dance. Play any of the major sports such as the NFL, NBA, NHL, and MLB, as well as UFC, NASCAR, golf, soccer, and various college sports without competing against all those sharks. Right now, you can open a new Monkey Knife Fight account, make an initial deposit, and get a full year of DLF Premium for free. On top of that, if you use the promo code DLF, Monkey Knife Fight will match your deposit 100%, doubling your initial funds. Simply log on to dynastyleaguefootball.com, click the image from Monkey Knife Fight, and follow the instructions to get started today. The Broncos, they blanked the Jets 26-0 on Sunday. Teddy Bridgewater went for 235 and 25 rushing yards, but didn't get into the end zone. So those of us that used him as a QB2 in Superflex leagues came out disappointed. I guess, really, if you played anybody, you're relatively disappointed in this game because Melvin Gordon, he scored, but just 61 yards on the ground. Javonte Williams, he scored just 29 on the ground, added 3 for 33 in the air. Tim Patrick saved his day with a deep ball down the sideline late to go 5 for 98. Cortland Sutton disappointed, 5 for 37. Noah Fant did the same, just 2 for 15. The Broncos kicked the Jets' ass, and we didn't get anything from anybody, it felt like. The Jets, especially, Zach Wilson, 160, no touchdowns, 2 picks, couldn't use the running backs. Michael Carter was trash, couldn't use the wide receiver. Corey Davis couldn't get open, and when he did, he didn't catch the ball, just 5 for 41. There's really nothing to say here, Ryan.
No, I mean, it's terrible for the Jets, and that was a big storyline of the offseason was, should we expect kind of the same old story from the Jets, basically being one of the worst teams in the league, or can this new coaching staff and these 3 key rookies on offense turn things around? And they definitely have not so far. The Jets are another one of those teams. You can't start any of those players at all. Corey Davis had a strong week 1, has been pretty quiet since then. Michael Carter's kind of gaining and starting to take over that backfield, but it doesn't even matter because they're getting hammered all the time. Elijah Moore, another down game, also got a concussion in this game. So terrible, again, short-term, long-term. I still want Wilson on my team, and I still want Elijah Moore on my team for sure. So I would be targeting those guys. Like we said with most of these other rookies, I don't think there's anybody out there panic selling on either of those 2 players, but maybe you can find the situation. A contending team has Zach Wilson and is looking for a Derek Carr type. Maybe that's the start of a deal that you could make in a super flex league.
with all these interceptions for Zach Wilson, I certainly see some dynasty managers starting to fret quite a bit and bail out relatively soon, especially if it happens again next week. How about the Dolphins and the Raiders? This one went to overtime. The Raiders kicked 2 field goals in overtime. Dolphins only kicked 1, so Las Vegas wins 31-28. Derek Carr, 386, again, just piling up the stats, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Other than that, the running game, surprisingly, guys, Peyton Barber, 23 carries for 111 yards and found pay dirt. He also caught 3 passes for 31. So Barber is suddenly somebody we're thinking about putting in our starting lineups. And then the pass catcher for the Raiders, the pass catchers for the Raiders, Brian Edwards, 3 for 89, Henry Ruggs, 4 for 78, and then Hunter Renfrow, another guy we're probably surprised, but we got to start thinking about putting him in our lineup, 5 for 77 and a touchdown. Darren Waller caught 5 for 54, so the ball gets spread out well there. If there's a story here dynasty-wise, Ryan, it probably lies on Miami side of things. Malcolm Brown gets the start, but just 7 for 31 and the touchdown. Myles Gaskin, 13 for 65. From the pass catching, Jalen Waddle, guys, 12 catches for 58 yards, a lot of underneath stuff on 13 targets. And then Mike Gesicki, 10 for 86 on 12 targets. With Jacoby Brissett in the game, he was slinging it. He was getting it out. He was throwing it around the ballpark, not necessarily pushing it down the field, but Gesicki and Waddle are suddenly guys we're thinking about a lot.
I think we have to, especially Waddle. And you think about this offense in general. Obviously, Jacoby Brissett is not the future. He's barely the present in Miami, just waiting for Tua to get healthy. None of those running backs are the future. I don't want to use any of them. They cancel each other out. Jalen Waddle is really the one piece here who is kind of a cornerstone of this offense. And even Gesicki is a free agent after this year. Will Fuller, who made his debut in this game, is on a 1-year deal. So Jalen Waddle should be the player that they really focus on. And to see him get 13 targets and catch 12 of those, even if it is a backup quarterback and largely garbage time trying to come back, it's still impressive and noteworthy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I remember Gesicki was hot garbage in week 1, didn't even catch a pass. And then last week, 3 for 41, now 10 for 86. Maybe he works his way into a place where you can use him as a back-end tight end 1 once again, like he was last year, but that's probably the best case scenario. Maybe he does enough that you can get something for him on the trade block from a contender that needs a fringe tight end 1 at some point. After that, not a lot to talk about as far as the rest of this offense goes outside of Will Fuller got on the field for the first time, 3 catches for 20 yards. So a guy that we're going to be monitoring moving forward. The next game we need to talk about, the Rams, they beat the Buccaneers 34-24. Matthew Stafford was magnificent, 343 and 4 touchdowns in the ball game. 2 of those go to Cooper Kupp. Deshaun Jackson gets deep, wide open multiple times, ends up catching 3 for 120 and a score on 5 targets. So, we watched the game. We saw Stafford spread it out quite a bit, but most of it really went to Cooper Kupp. Robert Woods, on the other hand, Ryan, is just not a big part of the offense to this point in the season.
He hasn't been yet. Came into the week with games of wide receiver 46 and wide receiver 44. Currently, with a couple games left in the week, he's the wide receiver 57. So this is one of those teams that we see the top 2 guys, Woods and Cooper Kupp, kind of taking turns with their big games. But now we're looking at 3 games in a row of a sample size with Woods disappointing. At this point, there's just no way you can start him. He's a little bit older. He's always been one of those guys whose value has been less than his production. So, this might be a situation where you're caught holding the bag, because if he's not producing, his value is going to drop so quickly.
Yeah, and it feels like that's already happening. Sorry, Matt.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it seems like he needs to start joining Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford at those breakfasts,
Yeah, I guess so.
Every morning, because he's not on the same page as them. Seems like a couple of waffles and some orange juice or something, maybe get him back on the same page.
Well, it seems like to me that Robert Woods is the guy setting the pick, the rub for Cooper Kupp to get open. So he's a team player, and that's great for football, but not great for fantasy football, because Woods, it really isn't even getting the looks. He got 1 shot down the sideline, But outside of that, it was a couple little second, third option type plays, and he ends up having a disappointing day. 3 for 33 on 6 targets. Van Jefferson outproduced him, 4 for 42. Deshaun Jackson, 3 for 120 and a score. It's just they can't get the ball to all these guys. Even Higbee had 5 for 40. In Tampa Bay, Tom Brady, 432 yards and a touchdown. They didn't seem like the same offense really to me. They did not run the ball. They spread the ball out. Mike Evans had 8 catches for 106. Chris Godwin had 6 for 74. And then Gronk got his 4 for 55. But Gio Bernard was the one who caught the late touchdown, 9 for 51. And that score, I don't know if we take too much away from this game. Tampa Bay is going to score a lot of points. Tom Brady's going to put up a lot of yardage and spread it out to all his guys. Mostly, if your guy is on the field and he catches the ball from Tom Brady, you're probably starting him every single week.
Yeah, I'm going to have to hit up one of my favorite sites, Pro Football Reference, and check the history on this one because Tom Brady was the leading rusher for his team. 3 carries, 14 yards, nothing from Rojo, nothing from Fournette. Chris Godwin had 1 carry and scored a touchdown on it. He's played a long time, so I'm sure it's happened, but it has to be pretty rare that Brady leads his team in rushing.
Yeah, Brady had the rushing touchdown, the goal line plunge, and then Godwin had the other rushing touchdown. The other 2, Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones that you mentioned, 9 carries for 19 yards between the 2 of them. The final game we need to talk about, the Seattle Seahawks go to Minnesota and lose that one 30-17 to the Vikings. Kirk Cousins looked great, very accurate throughout the game, 30 for 38 through the air, 323 yards, and 3 touchdown passes. The story probably, guys, was Alexander Mattison. He's been talked about for years as the guy that was the heir apparent, was that premier handcuff type running back, and he gets a shot with Dalvin Cook on the shelf, 26 carries, 112 yards, didn't find the end zone, but caught 6 passes for 59 yards, Matt. He certainly looked good against a Seattle defense that is at least average against the run.
Yeah, and I don't really know what to do with them. I feel like this is a moment that if you're not a Cook owner or someone that has Cook on your roster, then maybe this is your chance to get him off of your roster and free up a roster spot. Because this is what you're waiting for, right? You're waiting for this game where Cook is going to miss, and really what you're waiting for is Cook to have that bombshell moment again where he has one of those injuries that puts him out for the year. I don't really think that this is that though. He's probably back next week with that sprained ankle. I don't think it was a high ankle sprain. So, he wasn't really close to playing this week, but we didn't get news until late that he was going to be out. So it was a true game time decision there. So if that's the case, and he just goes back to being a bench player for you, a roster clogger, maybe you try to use this time to, if the Dalvin Cook owner is a little bit afraid of the current situation there, maybe you use this as a moment to go and sell it to him as that backup for them. And you can probably get a 2nd round pick. It's in the trade finder quite a few trades for a 2nd round pick. So I think that probably would be my play. Otherwise, you hold him and you just hope, which sounds terrible to say, you don't want to hope for an injury for anyone. But if you're a Madison manager and you don't have Cook, what else are you doing with him at this point? So this might be a time to get out and get some value back if you are able to do that. This is definitely the best game of his career, filling in for Cook when he was injured. So, there's a chance that you're either going to wait till the next team or, just going to be holding the bag with this guy. So might as well get a pick now, I think.
I just don't know if the bag's that big when it comes to Alexander Madison. You
don't think a second?
I guess, if you can get it, and I'm probably taking it if I can. I don't know if a lot of people are paying it. Do you think so?
I think a Cook manager might. If you're relying on Cook to lead you through to the finals, I assume if you have Dalvin Cook on your roster, you are a competing team, maybe a top team in your league. And with Madison's game today, and Cook getting banged up, maybe you want to get some insurance for that. That would be my move. If you can't get a second, I'm not going to move him for less than that though.
Well, I've got to eat some crow here. It was just 2 weeks ago that we saw Madison get the same number of touches as Amir Abdullah, and I looked at him and just thought, get this guy off your roster right now. And I think I told listeners to take 2/3 if you could get it. which honestly is maybe still kind of the price, 1 second or 2/3. But of course had a big game in this one and was very impressive. So if you're holding him and you get that single RB1 game, which is what he's going to be in this one and this week, then that kind of makes it worth it. I mean, if you're in a big league and can get a top 12 week out of a bench guy, that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, and we knew to start him. That's the other part of it. It wasn't one of these things where Cook got hurt in the first quarter, then Madison gets the chance,
Right.
and nobody started him. Then the next week we put him in our lineups, and he doesn't do a thing for us. Everybody knew that if you're going to use Madison, it was this week. He was going to get his opportunity. That passing game was working. It opened up the running game, and the Vikings looked like a completely different team as to what they looked the first 2 weeks. Justin Jefferson, 9 for 118 and a score. Tyler Conklin caught 7 for 70 and a touchdown. And Thielen found the end zone on 6 for 50 through the air as well. They spread the ball out. They looked really good. For Seattle, Russell Wilson, man, he takes pressure more than any quarterback in the league. 298 yards and a touchdown. That came to DK Metcalf, who went for over 100 yards. Chris Carson was good, 12 for 80, but they were playing from behind. The rest of it was real disappointing. Gerald Everett, 5 for 54. Lockett got banged up late in the game and only went 4 for 31. So he did his normal blow up, then disappear type thing. Hopefully he's okay. I don't know if there's a lot of takeaways when it comes to Seattle, maybe not even a lot when it comes to Minnesota either. This game did show that kind of the ups and downs of an NFL season, because this wasn't the game I expected to play out. The game script that I thought we would see was more of Seattle running the ball, Minnesota having to throw to catch up, and Cousins and the receivers getting theirs. Really the opposite happened, and a lot of that had to do with Madison and that front five for the Vikings. They were creating holes for that running game. That's going to do it for this edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast, guys. For Ryan and Matt, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you in week 4.